So it is today, Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. And if you're checking your feeds, you've probably seen the footage.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
The snow is settling on the promenade in Davos, cameras are flashing, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has just stepped off the main stage at the World Economic Forum. And honestly, he looked the part.
He really did. Confident, assertive. It was definitely a mission accomplished moment, at least in terms of the optics.
Right. He stood there and delivered a speech that was clearly meant to be a victory lap.
Yeah, he was essentially telling the global elite that the sleeping giant of Europe has, finally woken up. The narrative he pushed is that Germany is now a real strategic actor, that they finally moved past that old, comfortable pacifism.
The Zeitenwende is finally complete, according to him. But, and this is why we're here, we have a stack of analysis that says not so fast.
Yeah.
While the applause was still ringing, a new paper dropped from the Global Reviw by an analyst named Fareed Novin. And Novin is not buying the victory lap, not even a little bit.
No, he really isn't. It's a stinging critique. His core argument is that while Merz might sound like a leader, the German state itself is actually suffering from a profound strategic disorientation.
Strategic disorientation.
Yeah. He argues that what looks like decisiveness is really just a series of, panicked reactions.
And that's not what you want from the biggest economy in Europe, especially not now. So for this deep dive, we're going to peel back the layers of this speech. We're going to look at a specific comment about dirty work that's causing chaos, a massive blind spot on China, and the real reason military spending has spiked so high.
And to do that right, we have to get into the central framework of Novin's paper. It all hinges on a concept from statistics called Bayesian learning.
Okay, I have to admit, when I saw Bayesian learning, I had immediate flashbacks to college stats. It sounds a bit academic. Why are we talking about probability theory when we're talking about tanks and trade deals?
It sounds intimidating, I know, but it's actually a very intuitive way to understand how nations think. In simple terms, it's just a fancy way of describing how we update our beliefs, our priors, when we get new evidence. It's the feedback loop of life.
So it's basic learning. I believe X, I see evidence of Y, so I change my mind.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
Think of the classic hot stove example. You believe a stove is cold, you touch it, you burn your hand, you immediately update your belief. Okay, the stove is hot. You learn instantly from the pain.
Of a fast update.
A very fast update. But Novin's argument is that Germany suffers from asymmetric belief updating.
Asymmetric, meaning they learn some lessons fast and other lessons really slowly.
Precisely. The analysis shows that when Germany faces immediate financial loss, a drop in car sales, a tariff, an energy price spike, they panic and update their policy instantly. They are hyper-reactive to economic pain.
Okay.
But when they face long-term, slow-moving security risks, threats that might blow up 5 or 10 years from now, they update incredibly slowly.
That is fascinating. So a drop in Volkswagen stock price is a national emergency, but a geopolitical rival building an army that might threaten them in a decade is something for later.
That's the Bayesian trap in a nutshell. And today we're going to see 3 examples from this one speech where that trap is snapping shut.
All right, let's get into the first one because it's the moment that has everyone's phones buzzing. Merz was discussing the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran, and he used a phrase to describe recent Israeli military action. Well, it landed with a thud. He called it dirty work for the West.
Dirty work, yeah. It's such a revealing choice of words. On the surface, I think Merz thought he was being gritty and realistic, We're all adults here. But Novin points out this is incredibly dangerous language.
It sounds so dismissive, like he's talking about taking out the trash. Something necessary, but, unpleasant.
It's worse than that. It implies a moral hierarchy. When the leader of Germany calls military action dirty work that needs to be done for the West, he is effectively saying,
we want the benefits, the reduced nuclear threat, but we don't want to get our hands dirty.
Exactly. We want to outsource the moral and material costs to someone else. It's the ultimate free rider problem.
A real have your cake and eat it too moment. Good job with that violent thing we needed, but please don't stand too close to us.
And the fallout is significant, especially in the global south and the Arab world. Remember, Germany has spent decades building this reputation as a Zivilmacht, a civilian power.
Right, the honest broker. They show up with clipboards and aid packages, not fighter jets.
But now, with one phrase, he's exposed the hypocrisy. It tells the world that Germany is happy to let others bear the ethical burden of war as long as Berlin gets to enjoy the safety it provides. It alienates allies who see this and think, okay, so we're just your instruments, the janitors of your security.
And it connects to this broader theme in the paper of Normative inconsistency. It feels like Germany uses this high-minded moral language when it's cheap, but the moment things get messy, they switch to this cold, transactional mode.
That's the core of the critique. You can't build alliances on that. Allies need to know who you are, a moral actor or a transactional one. By trying to be both, Germany ends up being trusted as neither.
And that inconsistency flows right into the second big issue, which I found even more alarming because it's about what Merz didn't say. He pivots to security in the Arctic, and he points the finger squarely at Russia.
Which is the easy, safe bet. Everyone knows Russia is a problem there. It's the obvious threat.
But he completely ignored the other player in the region. The analysis calls it the polar bear in the room, China.
A classic textbook example of that Bayesian trap. The evidence is right there. By this year, 2026, Beijing has officially designated itself a near-Arctic state. That's not just rhetoric, that's strategic doctrine.
I mean, what does that look like on the ground? Or on the ice, I guess.
It looks like dual-use infrastructure. Massive satellite coverage tailored for the polar corridor. They're integrating scientific research with military operations right there on NATO's northern flank. It's happening now.
So why would the German Chancellor stand up at Davos, talk about Arctic security, and just pretend China isn't there? Was it an oversight?
No, it's a calculation, and it's back to that asymmetry. Mentioning China as a security threat costs money, real money. Germany's industrial base cars, machinery, chemicals is still deeply structurally dependent on exports to China.
So if Merz calls out Beijing's military buildup, Volkswagen sells fewer cars in Shanghai next month.
That's the fear. Novin argues that Merz's silence is a deliberate choice to ignore a low-probability, high-impact security risk China in the north, because the immediate economic cost of angering Beijing is just too high.
The stove analogy again. Losing car sales is a hot stove. It hurts right now. A future Chinese military base is just a theoretical stove.
But think about how that lands in Helsinki or Tallinn. For the Nordic and Baltic states, Arctic security is existential. When they see Germany signaling that they might trade away security on NATO's northern flank to protect chemical exports, that is just corrosive to trust.
It tells your allies that your security commitments have a price tag. And that really undermines the whole Germany has awakened narrative, doesn't it?
It completely guts it. A leader anticipates threats. A manager just tries to keep the quarterly profit stable. That speech felt like management.
Speaking of management, let's talk about the big headline number, 5%.
Yeah.
Germany has endorsed a defense spending target of 5% of GDP.
Which is huge. Let's not understate it. A few years ago, we were arguing that they could even hit 2%. Now 5%. That is a Cold War level of mobilization.
Right. So on paper, I'd say, wow, Germany's finally taking this seriously on its own terms. That sounds like the awakening he promised.
And if you only read the headline, you would be completely wrong. This is where the deep dive gets really interesting. This wasn't a German idea. The source calls this adaptation under duress.
And the duress came from, let me guess,
Yeah.
the U.S.
It came from the 2025 Hague Summit and President Donald Trump. It was explicit and it was brutal. The Trump administration directly linked U.S. protection to burden sharing. But this wasn't just the usual rhetoric. There were specific warnings about the vulnerability of Greenland.
Greenland. Why Greenland?
Strategic geography. The GIUK gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK, is the gateway to the Atlantic. If you lose control of that, you lose the shipping lanes that keep Europe alive. Trump basically told the Europeans, you pay up or we won't guarantee the security of the North Atlantic.
That's intense. It's basically a protection racket. Nice trade routes you have there.
Essentially, yes. And that is the only reason Germany moved. They updated their priors, to use our term, only when the U.S. put a gun to their head. They didn't wake up because the world was dangerous. They woke up because their bodyguards threatened to quit.
Which again reinforces this view of Germany as a reactive state, not a proactive one.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Even with this 5% target, the analysis suggests they might not even be able to pay for it.
Because the domestic situation.
Yes, the domestic paralysis. We have to talk about the Schuldenbremse, the debt brake.
It's in their constitution, right? It limits new debt.
Yes. And Novin calls this the domestic rot, undermining their foreign policy. Germany's been in an industrial contraction since the 2022 energy shock. The economy isn't growing like it used to.
So where does the money come from?
Well, economists and defense planners are screaming that they need to borrow to modernize. You can't reach 5% defense spending just by cutting libraries. You need massive investment.
But the politics say no.
The political orthodoxy is rigid. So you have this huge conflict. Berlin wants to project power to satisfy Trump, but refuses to borrow the money to pay for it at home.
And this paralysis is driving their neighbors crazy.
Oh, completely. The source says relations with France are at their worst since the 1960s. Paris sees Merz as an Atlantic vassal, too close to Trump and too stubborn on EU budget rules.
And Poland.
Still deeply distrustful. They see this caution as unreliability. If you won't borrow to build tanks, will you really send them when it counts?
And then you have spoilers, like Hungary's Viktor Orban.
Who is playing Germany like a fiddle. He knows Berlin is desperate for EU unity, so he uses that to extract concessions while staying cozy with Moscow and Beijing. Germany is so afraid of rocking the boat, they let the bad actors steer it.
It's a pretty bleak picture. So looking forward, the source lays out scenarios for the next 5 years. Where does this all go?
It uses that Bayesian framework to predict what happens. Scenario A, the most likely, is what Novin calls the vassal state.
The vassal state. Wow, that hurts.
It's harsh, but it fits. In this scenario, Germany stays rich, but it loses its strategic autonomy. It aligns with U.S. defense demands because it has to, but it stays dependent on China for trade because it's too afraid not to.
So it's caught, taking orders from Washington on security, walking on eggshells with Beijing on trade.
Germany becomes a reactive node, not a leader. It survives, but it doesn't shape the world. It just responds to it.
And the other scenarios.
Scenario B is hollow hegemon. They hit the 5% target on paper, but they don't actually lead anything. It's a bureaucratic success, but a strategic failure. All the guns, none of the will.
Is there a scenario C? A happy ending.
Scenario C is strategic rebirth. This is the best case. It would require them to kill the debt brake, invest massively, and truly integrate with France and Poland to create a European pillar of NATO.
But the analysis says that's the least likely outcome.
Because Germany learns too slowly, strategic rebirth requires foresight, and everything we've discussed shows that Germany only moves when it's forced by pain. Right now, Berlin is running entirely on hindsight.
Which leads to the source's advice for G7 partners. And it's blunt.
It's very blunt. It says, don't rely on Berlin as a default coordinator. Hedge against Germany's indecision. Build structures that work around Germany, not just through it.
That is a stunning demotion for a country that used to be called the indispensable nation of Europe.
It is. The conclusion is that Germany is a conditional ally defined by strategic volatility. They aren't an enemy, but you can't be sure they'll be there because their internal contradictions just haven't been resolved.
So we started with a speech that promised a new dawn, and we've ended up diagnosing a kind of strategic paralysis.
It really forces you to question what leadership actually means. Is it just having the biggest GDP? Or is it the ability to make hard choices before they're forced on you?
And that's the question I want to leave with you, our listener, today. We've talked about Bayesian learning from new evidence. But usually, by the time the evidence is overwhelming, it's too late. So if a country, or a person for that matter, only learns from pain and shock rather than foresight, can they ever really be trusted to hold the line when things get tough?
It's a question that keeps defense planners awake at night. And frankly, after reading this paper, I think I need to go update my own priors about where Europe is heading.
Me too. I thought I knew the map, but it turns out the terrain has changed under our feet. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive. Stay curious.